Dear viewers, we're now at the main entrance of the mosque-madrasah. This madrasah had rooms where citizens were taught as well as a library. Now we will talk with Farida Manapqızı, who is the custodian of this complex. We want to know more about the mosque's history, as well as how it was built, maintained, and renovated. Farida, how did the construction of the mosque begin? Could you tell us the exact time and location when the building's design first came about?
Appak Ishan mosque-madrasасы төл құжаты бойынша 1845 жылы соғылған. Бұл жерде өздеріңіз көріп отырғандай сыртқы көрінісі өте керемет, әдемі соғылған.
As to the passport, the Appak Ishan mosque-madrasah was constructed in 1845. The look is quite amazing. As you can see, the adhankhana lecture hall and madrasa are its three main complexes. Written accounts claim that this building's design was brought from Damascus. However, no records have been saved elsewhere. Therefore, it is impossible to pinpoint precisely who worked on its construction. Oral accounts state that it came from Damascus. It was the biggest school in Kazakhstan at the time. After working mostly with students, we will discuss this topic more. Ethnographer Uzbekalija Nebekov, who was then the Minister of Culture, fought hard to preserve it. At the time, all of Kazakhstan's cultural monuments were taken under the government's protection. This includes the Appak Ishan Mosque. He established a museum dedicated to carpet goods in an effort to preserve this building. The Carpet Museum's goal was to preserve the outside building. Throughout his tenure as a Minister of Culture, he took only the month's vacation. He then approved finding of this kind of cultural monuments and made surprise visit to see them. He was a person endowed with such attributes. It would be unthinkable to overlook the name of Uzbekalija Nebekov, a remarkable Kazakh citizen who was helpful in saving this architecture. He worked tirelessly and was honored. He was the Kazakh people's carer. It is not overstated to suggest that this individual made a significant contribution to the prevention of destruction.
You mentioned that it was the largest building at the time. How many hujras
Now
are there
there are
now?
29 rooms. Now many people don't understand what
Yes,
hujra
29.
means. There are 29
I have heard
rooms.
that there were 40
There were
rooms
no
at first.
40 rooms. The project called for the construction of 40 rooms, but only 29 were completed because of financial constraints. The construction
those
process
rooms that the
took
children
several
studied.
years. Yes, they studied there and lived in
The dormitory was two-story. Is it true?
It was likely a regular boarding school. The children slept upstairs and studied below. Few people, as you may know, had access to schooling. Some students paid one horse to read a single book. People also helped in its construction. The wealthy and village chiefs provided their children with financial support as well as education.
How many children studied in a single room?
About 5,
In
10.
case every room had 10 students, the total number of apprentices would exceed 200.
Indeed, based on these records from this period, there were around 120 learners.
It would be a
and 20
massive
teachers.
madrasa if we were to state that there were 120 learners
Yes,
there.
120 students studied there. There were volumes behind the door, which can be considered a library in modern terms. Books with old script writing were the most priceless artifacts at the period. I now have more than 45 copies of the text used by Appak Ishan himself.
This madrasa functioned as one of the colleges we have. When we were younger, we attended vocational training centers, or UPK, for our studies. People made the connection between theory and practice, or the knowledge they had learned there. This place, I believe, functioned in the same manner. In this classroom, students studied, checked out a book from the library, and reread it like a textbook. He also performed the Friday prayer. The teachers performed the Friday prayer in addition to the
In
teachings.
addition, Appak Ishan was the representative of the third generation who taught and practiced Islam. It was Qasim Baba who initiated this work. Indeed, with all the discourse about this, his father Sayyid Ahmed is often left out. Qasim Baba began it. His father Sayyid Ahmed carried it through, and Appak Ishan completed it. It had persisted for a long time.
It was a legacy of 3 generations.
Yes, Appak Ishan is the representative of the third generation. As we said before, Uzbekali Janibekov established the Baydabek District Architecture Art Museum with the goal to preserve the building. The museum celebrated 40 years in 2022. However, the museum's name is not used among locals. It is still known as the Appak Ishan mosque-madrasah. It is recognized as a historical landmark by both the local and the tourists. Although it's referred to be a museum, some people mistake it for the Appak Ishan Museum. Appak Ishan is, of course, the building's principal owner.
It is said that Friday prayers were held here for 40 years after we got independence.
Yes, until 2014.
So what Friday prayer performed from 1991 to 2014?
Yes, it was performed up until 2014. The same year we celebrated the 140th anniversary of Appak Ishan. At the time we received instructions from above that the museum should only serve as a museum. By then the locals were used to it. Of course, hardly everyone in the community showed up. The quantity of prayers reduced as the time changed, but there were some who came to pray on Friday.
I am wondering if the original goal of this site was for young people to learn, read the Quran and deliver the adhan. Why not continue in that way? Then some perceived it as a mosque. That's right, it is a historical monument and cultural heritage. This is a museum, and everyone knows it. However, the locals see it as a mosque, a holy site. Perhaps this is why it's called a mosque-madrasah. If it has been 40 years since it became a museum, has it been preserved precisely how it was from the beginning?
No, as you are aware, everything went into ruin and the place was left without owners during Soviet rule. This building windows and doors were taken at the time. Russians also liked here during the Soviet era. Locals said that it had been turned into a store and dormitory. Once the state took ownership of it, they allotted funds and renovated the structure. It was restored.
Who is working on the restoration?
The state repaired the buildings.
Is it true that the same kind of bricks were made and brought here?
Yes, indeed, this brings us to one additional point. He is a great master named Imash Zakhanova, who has been working for almost 40 years. The arcs in this complex are the result of much labor on his part. He built all of the arcs by himself. I will now show you the restorations photos. Pictures are arranged annually.
The renovation did not take a year, did it?
No, this took place every year. For example, we will send out a request letter. Then those people will allocate money and come here from the start of the repair work until the end. There are images and documents demonstrating how these arcs were constructed. For instance, let me demonstrate this. This log is the most original component of this structure. If you can see all those heads, this log's an authentic. There is also a legend about it.
Yes, I've heard a legend about these logs. Something about taking an exact amount of logs, nothing else. It said that a legend took place there. Could you tell me about it?
Қазата деген әулие болған.
In the Berdebek area, there lived a saint named Kazakh. Appak Ishan went there with his workers and sought Kazakh's permission. It is alleged that he never provided anything more than what was needed. He granted them permission to chop only 20 pieces of wood. Appak Ishan gave their workers a warning not to take more than 12 and traveled to Shayan village by himself. Workers chopped the 12 logs. Then one of them said that maybe 20 pieces of wood would not be enough. It would take time to return here and chop more trees. Therefore, it would be better to just cut one or two more spare. Nothing would happen, he added. It's believed that blood spilled out when a log is chopped without permission, and the person who chopped the tree died instantly, while one of them saw it next to him fell. Appak Ishan was in Shayan, where someone came after him to inform him about the issue. Appak Ishan was disappointed because his workers chopped down tree without permission. A man who had fainted there revived by prayer. And the 20 logs that Kazakh gave them with his permission were sufficient enough to make all of the door heads. That's why Kazakh never gave extra.
Everything was based on his calculation.
Yes, and he always made sure that his calculations were sufficient and exact.
The first mentioned was a lecture hall, then a madrasa, and the last?
Was the adhankhana.
Adhankhana. Yes, inside the adhankhana we can see a rope, a prayer rug, and books. Where did they
When we
come
celebrated
from?
Appak Ishan's 150th anniversary, his descendants handed us these historic items. We created a special exhibition dedicated to him, and his books were displayed.
Does this imply that the rope was worn by our ancestor Appak Ishan?
Киетін киім
What about the prayer rug?
Аппақ Ишан.
This prayer rug was handwoven by Appak Ishan's grandmother. You will know that at the top of this rug there is a small inscription written in Arabic. Appak Ishan's given name was Maghzum. Maghzum reed is written there.
It might suggest that Maghzum used this prayer rug to read the namaz, and there are Quran and Arabic manuscripts. Could you tell me in what condition these items are?
Қазіргі кезде оны біздің енді міндетіміз музей болғаннан кейін солардың барлығын сақтап отырмыз, қолдан келгенше сақтап отырмыз. Ал бірақ негізі
Our job as a museum is to preserve anything. However, in order to protect the artifacts for future generations, restoration is required. And restoration costs money.
ақша.
It's not cheap, of course. It requires funds, time, and experts. Is there any expert among you who has opened and read the book?
We have people who can read some parts of the writing. It is allegedly written in the Shahnama language. 5 languages are used in Shahnama. There is Arabic text within that can be read, but we are unable to read text in other languages. It also included his students' writing.
No matter how you look at it, I think this effort is wonderful and valuable. We shall preserve it for the following generation and pass it on as custodians. Even if we are unable to read it, there are lots of specialists. The SAMK, Spiritual Administration of Muslims of Kazakhstan, is in charge of a large number of madrasas, and Nur Mubarak University in Almaty is graduating a large number of specialists. If we are not able to read it now, I believe that we will read it translated tomorrow, and with God's help, pass those artifacts on to the following generation. We sincerely appreciate your assistance and the useful information you provided. Enjoy the results of your hard work. Stay healthy.
God's willing. Thank you.
Thank you.